Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We've got a truly fascinating journey ahead of us today, so let's just dive right in. We're going to be unpacking the dramatic, deeply moving opening chapters of the Book of Ruth. And, don't let the ancient setting fool you. This is an absolute masterclass on how we navigate life's deepest, most painful hardships. If you've ever found yourself wondering where God is when literally everything around you seems to be falling apart, well, you're absolutely going to want to stick around for this one. Because it brings up a huge question. When famine strikes the promised land, what do you actually do? It's kind of the central paradox of Ruth chapter 1. See, the story kicks off with this really jarring statement. A severe famine hits Bethlehem. Now, why is that so shocking? Because Bethlehem is literally in the promised land. We all kind of carry around this assumption that God's chosen people, those living exactly where they're supposed to be, will only experience smooth, prosperous lives. But when a famine strikes right where the blessings are supposed to flow, it completely shatters that illusion. Seriously, what do you do when the well runs dry in the promised land?
Well, dealing with that kind of hardship is exactly what we're looking at first. And we have to remember, this isn't just some ancient agricultural problem, it's a deeply human one. God's people are absolutely not exempt from worldly hardship. Even today, believers face sudden job losses, terrifying illnesses, really intense relational struggles. Being in the promised land back then didn't stop the famine, and being a person of faith today certainly doesn't stop the storms of life. So the real kicker here is this. We're challenged to figure out exactly how we should respond to a perfect, good God when our immediate circumstances are just completely falling apart.
And of course, one common response is to just try and run away from it all. This brings us to a guy named Elimelech. He's smart, he's resourceful, and he's faced with a really stark dilemma. On one side, you have Bethlehem, the promised land, sure, but it's experiencing a severe, life-threatening famine. On the other side, you've got Moab. Now, Moab is a pagan land, entirely outside of God's covenant, but rumor has it they have plenty of food. Using pure worldly wisdom, Elimelech makes a choice that honestly seems incredibly logical. He decides to just pack up the whole shebang and relocate his family to Moab just to survive. He effectively chooses the guarantee of food over the guarantee of God's presence. But stop and think about the physical reality of this escape for a second. We're talking 100 to 120 kilometers. This was not some quick afternoon road trip. This was a grueling, extreme 7 to 10 day journey. And the elevation changes? Absolutely brutal. They had to descend from the highlands all the way down to the Dead Sea area, dropping to basically 0 meters in elevation, and then desperately climb all the way up into the mountains of Moab at 900 meters. I mean, that really paints a picture of just how massive Elimelech's determination was to just cut and run from his problems. But tragically, they escaped the famine only to lose their lives. Elimelech and his 2 sons ultimately die in Moab. It's a sobering, tragic outcome. And it teaches us a really tough lesson. Worldly shortcuts might save your stomach in the short term, but they can entirely destroy your life. Trying to cleverly bypass the trials God allows in the Promised Land, it often leads to a far, far worse tragedy in Moab. So, what happens to the ones left behind? This is where we see true loyalty tested. In the wake of all this tragedy, we see this incredible, stark contrast between a very bitter Naomi and a deeply faithful Ruth. When they finally decide to head back to Bethlehem, Naomi actively tries to get rid of Ruth. She does this in 3 clear steps. Step 1, in verse 8, she tells her to go back to her mother. Step 2, verse 12, she pleads, "Return, my daughters." And step 3, in verse 15, she points out that Ruth's sister-in-law went back to her pagan gods and basically tells Ruth to do the exact same thing. Naomi repeatedly pushes her away because honestly, at this point, Naomi is just entirely consumed by bitterness. She firmly believes God is directly attacking her and bringing her calamity. She's literally the worst possible advertisement for following Jehovah. Yet, despite Naomi's terrible living example, we get this absolutely incredible response from Ruth. "Do not urge me to leave you. Your God will be my God." I mean, wow. This is the emotional climax of the chapter. Ruth makes this radical, bold declaration of faith. She isn't following Naomi because Naomi is some joyful, victorious believer. No way. She is choosing to follow God despite the brokenness of the believer standing right in front of her. Ruth's faith was an absolute, rock-solid conviction, not a product of human persuasion. Think about it for a second. She's leaving her homeland, her family, and her pagan gods behind to follow Jehovah, all while her primary spiritual mentor is literally telling her to go away. It's wild. This is a profound mark of divine grace at work in Ruth's heart.
It's a faith that stands completely on its own 2 feet. And that faith is immediately put to the test the moment they get back. Because when Naomi and Ruth finally make it back to Bethlehem, they're utterly impoverished. There's no welcome parade. We really need to bust a myth right here. The prosperity myth would tell us that, hey, because Ruth showed such amazing faith, she should just sit back and wait for a rich prince to magically arrive and save the day, right? A lot of people read the Bible exactly this way. But look at the biblical reality. Enduring hardship with humble obedience. True faith just isn't about expecting magical rewards or immediate VIP treatment just because you made a good spiritual choice. So, what did Ruth's faith actually look like in practice? Well, she refused to complain. She actively avoided self-pity. She faced her extreme poverty bravely, and she went right out to work a lowly, exhausting job gleaning, basically gathering the leftover wheat in the blazing hot sun. It really reminds me of Paul's letter to Timothy, where he talks about separating oneself from base, dishonorable things to become an instrument from noble purposes. Ruth didn't run from her low status. True faith means doing what you can right there in the mud. It means holding on to your responsibilities, working hard with what you have, and absolutely refusing to flee. And it's right there, in the mud and the dust of the fields, that something amazing happens. Ruth's active, humble obedience leads to this massive theological turning point. She seemingly found herself working in the field of Boaz, who happened to be a wealthy relative of her deceased father-in-law. Our source material points out something so beautiful here. Neither Ruth nor Boaz had any clue they were making history that day. Ruth wasn't gold digging. She was literally just trying to get some green so she and Naomi wouldn't starve to death. But while she was just faithfully doing her daily, mundane work, God was silently weaving his grand, ultimate plan of redemption right through their intersecting lives. You see, coincidence in the biblical sense is not random luck. Not at all. It is God's divine providence intersecting directly with human faithfulness. The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 16, verse 9, tells us that God's eyes search the whole earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. God was watching Ruth's faithful, complaint-free labor. Her winding up in Boaz's field wasn't a lucky accident. It was a divine appointment set up by the creator of the universe. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to challenge you with that central question one more time. How should we respond to God? We've seen Elimelech respond by cutting his losses and running away. We've seen Naomi respond with deep, blinding bitterness. And we've seen Ruth respond with steadfast loyalty and humble, everyday obedience. Guys, this isn't just ancient history. This is a mirror for our own modern struggles. When the famine hits your life, and it will, which response are you going to choose? I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. How you respond to hardship determines how God leads you. So often we just freeze in our tracks, constantly begging God to reveal his grand, sweeping will for our entire lives before we take a single step. But the story of Ruth begs us to flip that script. Instead of obsessing over God's hidden master plan, what if you simply asked how you can live out faithful, humble obedience in whatever mess you're in today? If you faithfully glean in the field you are planted in right now, who knows what divine coincidences God is perfectly orchestrating for your tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this challenges you to step out in faith today.